The NFL free agency frenzy is just around the corner, and believe it or not, your Denver Broncos are already ahead of the game. How, you ask? By not splurging all their money on just two players like many teams do. Instead, they're taking a smarter approach. In this video, we're diving into the moves that have kept fans talking, especially about some high profile players everyone was convinced were headed to Denver, only to re sign with their original teams. We'll explain why the Broncos are actually relieved it worked out this way, and how this gives them the chance to stretch their $40 million in cap space even further without breaking the bank. Now, if you're new here, I'm a die-hard Denver Broncos fan, so if you love the team, hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us out in the YouTube algorithm. One area where the Broncos definitely need improvement: we haven't had a 100-yard rusher in quite a few seasons. Fans were hoping Aaron Jones could be the solution. He was a hot topic among fans and analysts alike, with many saying, give him the money and bring him to Denver. Aaron Jones, fresh off his time with the Green Bay Packers, was expected to be a game changer. But then the Minnesota Vikings swooped in and secured him with a 2-year, $20 million deal, $13 million of which is guaranteed. That's a hefty contract for a 30-year-old running back who isn't quite on the level of Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry. While he's a solid player, his performance wasn't exactly breaking records, and some fans pointed out that his yards per carry weren't anything special compared to other Broncos running backs. So here's the silver lining. By missing out on Jones, the Broncos now have more flexibility in their budget. Instead of sinking big money into one player, they can allocate those resources across multiple areas of need, and it might just push them to explore the incredibly deep talent pool in this year's NFL draft, especially when it comes to running backs. This draft class has more running back talent than we've seen in a long time, and the Broncos could snag someone who could be a game changer for years to come. Honestly, missing out on Aaron Jones, I'm calling it a blessing in disguise. I definitely wouldn't have felt comfortable throwing that kind of money at him. As much as some fans were excited, I think the Broncos made the right move by letting him go. But there's one player who has a lot of fans feeling pretty down, and for good reason. Not only did we want him in orange and blue, but we also wanted him out of the dreaded red that belongs to the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, I'm talking about Nick Bolton. Bolton just re-signed with the Chiefs for a massive 3-year, $45 million deal. That's a pretty hefty price tag for an inside linebacker. Sure, a lot of people wanted him in Denver, but let's be honest, there were some concerns too. Many pointed out that his coverage skills weren't exactly top tier, and for that kind of money, it was a bit of a gamble. But even with his flaws, he still managed to secure $30 million in guaranteed money. When you think about it, that's just a ton of money for a player who isn't a perfect fit for the Broncos' needs. Now, as much as it stings to see Bolton stay in Kansas City, here's where things get interesting. This is where the Broncos can still shine. There are a number of solid options out there who won't cost nearly as much as Bolton or other top-tier players. Last season, the Broncos took a smart route by picking up Brandon Jones and Malcolm Roach, solid, dependable players who didn't come with the massive price tags of the A-list stars. And that's exactly the strategy we can use again. There are two young players who stand out, both with crazy potential, but at a much more affordable price. These guys are flying under the radar, but they could have a huge impact. First up is Jamie Sherwood from the Jets, and then there's Robert Spillane from the Raiders, who, by the way, spent some time with the Steelers. These two could be exactly what the Broncos need, and the best part? They won't come with the hefty contracts that we saw with Bolton or Zach Bond. The Broncos have a chance to bring in players who could be just as impactful, but without breaking the bank. Now let's talk about two players with a ton of potential. Guys who could really make an impact for the Broncos, and best of all, they won't break the bank. First up is Dre Greenlaw, a linebacker who could come at a much more affordable price than Nick Bolton. In fact, I see Greenlaw getting a deal similar to what Derrick Barnes got, saving the Broncos up to $20 million compared to Bolton. That's a smart move for a team looking to make every dollar count. But before we dive into Greenlaw, let's take a look at the other two options, starting with Jamie Sherwood from the New York Jets. I had a conversation with a Jets creator before their game against the Broncos, and when I mentioned how CJ Mosley was injured, they shocked me by saying they actually prefer Sherwood over Mosley. They were quick to point out that Sherwood is just as talented, without any of the drama that sometimes surrounds top-tier players. That's high praise, especially when you consider that Sherwood is a versatile physical player who excels at stopping the run, a skill the Broncos need after struggling against teams like Buffalo and Baltimore. His ability to step up and make those crucial tackles could be a huge asset for Denver. And the best part? You can get this kind of talent at a Walmart price. Sherwood might not be an A-list free agent, but he has the ceiling of a top-tier linebacker, and he could be just what the Broncos need. Next, let's talk about Robert Spillane, a linebacker who's been turning heads with his performances. I'll never forget seeing him step up and stuff a powerful back like Derrick Henry, something you don't see every day. Spillane played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team known for identifying great inside linebacker talent, and if they saw something special in him, that's a good sign. His coverage skills are solid too, as shown by that impressive interception over in front of Allen Lazard. Spillane is one of those players who brings physicality and grit, and his ability to make big plays could make him a great fit for the Broncos. When you watch Robert Spillane's coverage skills, you see a key difference compared to someone like Nick Bolton. There's a play where Spillane picks off Jordan Love, and that kind of coverage ability is something the Broncos desperately need. We've all seen how many times Cody Barton got burned on wheel routes and struggled in coverage, so adding someone like Spillane could really help fill that gap. Speaking of smart moves, Albert Breer made an interesting prediction about Dre Greenlaw, suggesting he could sign a 3-year, $25 million contract. After suffering that Achilles injury during the Super Bowl, Greenlaw hasn't quite been the same. Achilles injuries are tough to recover from, but at just 27 years old, Greenlaw has a much better shot at returning to form compared to older players like Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins. Getting Greenlaw at a reasonable price would be a huge win for the Broncos. He might not be the flashiest name, but his potential is just as high as Nick Bolton or Zach Bond. So when it comes to my top targets for the Broncos, Greenlaw is number 1, followed by Spillane and Sherwood in that order. But here's another piece of good news. There hasn't been any word about Tonga being re-signed by the San Francisco 49ers. If the Broncos could scoop him up, especially as a safety, that would be incredible. Now, the last curveball that's been thrown into the mix recently is the news that Von Miller has been released by the Buffalo Bills and is free to sign with another team. What do you think about Von returning to Denver for a farewell tour? Personally, I agree with Andrew Mason. Miller's leadership and intangibles were vital to that Super Bowl win. But the Broncos already have a strong group of edge rushers, and bringing Miller back could take snaps away from younger guys like DJ Jones, Jonah Ellis, Jonathan Cooper, and Nick Bonito. While it would be great to have Miller's leadership back, we also want to make sure we're developing the younger talent to its fullest potential. But honestly, there's something special about Von Miller's potential role as a mentor. Imagine bringing back a Super Bowl MVP to help guide the younger players on how to prep for big moments. Von's love for the Broncos is undeniable, and his leadership could make a huge difference. How cool would it be to have him back in Denver, showing the ropes to the next generation? The idea of giving him a veteran minimum deal with incentives that let him earn more based on performance sounds pretty reasonable. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear if you're on board with that idea. And before we wrap things up, I've got to mention something Brandon Perna, the godfather of Denver Broncos YouTube, recently said. He thinks this NFL free agency could be the most boring one ever, mainly because so many players are re-signing with their original teams. Do you agree with that? Or do you think there are enough A-list players out there for the Broncos to still make some exciting moves? For me, I'm still pumped. Free agency is one of the days I always circle on my calendar, and I can't wait to see what happens. So, make sure you're subscribed here so you don't miss a second of it. Who will the Broncos pick up tomorrow? Will we get one of those linebackers, a safety, a wide receiver? This could get wild. Broncos country, buckle up. We've got a ton to look forward to.